The executive budget cycle applies to the different types of government. So let's start first with the federal government and review the federal budget cycle. Who are the key actors in the federal budget process? The executive actors include the President, the Office of Management and Budget or OMB, and also the executive agency heads. Legislative actors in turn include the Congressional Budget Office or the CBO, the budget committees, the appropriations committees and their subcommittees, the House Ways and Means Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, and also authorizing committees in both the House and the Senate. This chart shows the timeline for the federal budget process. Appendix A in the Lewis and Hildreth text provides a much more detailed process of the preparation and submission and the review and approval stage of the federal budget process. Executive preparation and submission begins about 18 to 19 months in advance of the fiscal year. This is followed by the congressional budget process that includes the review and approval stage of the process. Once the budget is approved and signed into law, the fiscal year begins on October 1st, and implementation and execution begins, followed by review and audit, which concludes the budget cycle. In terms of preparation and submission, the federal process begins with OMB issuing its budget guidelines, which takes place around March the year before the fiscal year. The agencies develop and then build their budgets, then submit their budget requests to OMB about 6 months later, usually in September. The OMB reviews the budget requests, recommends budget proposals to the President, who then modifies a proposal that then becomes the President's budget. The OMB informs the agencies of the status of their budget requests, and the agencies can appeal the decision if they so desire. Once the President's budget is finalized, the agencies prepare and then the OMB reviews their congressional budget justifications. In February, the President transmits the budget to Congress, and this concludes the preparation and submission phase of the process. Congressional budget review and approval involves three main components. The first has to do with authorization decisions, the second has to do with appropriations, and the third has to do with revenue decisions. The key elements of public budgeting involve establishing an effective linkage among these three components. What do authorization, appropriation, and revenue decisions involve? Authorization involves the creation of an agency or a program and then defines the powers, responsibilities, and programming of this agency or program. Authorization bills establish, continue, or modify agencies or programs. Some examples of authorization bills might include, for example, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution in 1964 provided authorization for the use of military war in Southeast Asia. Another example is the Federal Transportation Department Reauthorization Bill that is typically reauthorized every 6 years. The current transportation authorization expired in 2009 and has been extended since, but no new authorization legislation has been enacted. Appropriations, on the other hand, gives an agency the legal power to incur financial obligations and to make payments. An appropriation is a type of budget authority that provides the authority to make obligations, but also gives the agency legal authority to make subsequent payments from the Treasury. There are three types of appropriations. Regular appropriation bills are appropriation bills passed during the congressional budget review and approval. So that's the first type of the appropriation bills. Second type of appropriation bills are called supplemental appropriations that may be passed over the course of the fiscal year and is solely intended to supplement appropriations that have already been passed. So for example, an agency needing to purchase equipment that had not been budgeted for in the regular appropriation may request and be granted supplemental appropriation to purchase this specific equipment. The third type of appropriation is a continuing resolution that acts very much like a regular appropriation bill, but that takes place or goes into effect when the regular appropriation bill has not been signed into law. This legislation takes the form of a joint resolution between the Senate and the House and provides funding for existing federal programs at current or reduced levels. Now, finally, revenue decisions involve decisions about the types of revenue sources that should be used, and then also addresses issues of whether the various revenues should be put into a common pool to fund all programs or should be earmarked for specific programs.